That's it. Yeah. All right. We shall continue on page 180. 6 lines from the top. The line starts with the word Misoyer B'Yahava. So we are kind of recapping what we said in the previous line, explaining the principle of Golus Mitzrayim, that the Golus Mitzrayim means that the Bina is in Golus, which means it is contained and restrained from being able to affect and influence the Midas. Because normally a hisbonenus in Seichel should reflect itself in Midas. This is the way the natural thing is. And he discussed how the Midas will be affected by hisbonenus in Ahava or Yira. Okay? Now the end of that line, Omnom. So, because we said at the very end that the Midas in relation to Seichel is like light in relation to a treasure. That if light shines upon a treasure, you immediately turn towards the treasure, you immediately appreciate its value, and you want it. So too, the Seichel shines a light on a given quality, and the midah relating to that light immediately awakens. Omnam, however, kol zehu b'mila diyalma. This simple reaction, response, that once you recognize a certain truth, you have an interest in it. This is b'mila diyalma. That happens naturally and simply in worldly matters. And we will come back to this statement after we see what it's contrasted to. Avo b'hasogos elokus, but in hasogo, in contemplation of elokus, of godliness, hine. There, however, hisbonenus bilvad eino maspekes adayin. The contemplation, the thinking about it by itself is not sufficient yet. It's not enough. V'tzorich liyois hiskashus, and there is need for hiskashus to connect. B'hasmodas havonas hahasoga. Hasmoda means constancy, dedication in understanding this hasoga. Ad asher bo, to the extent that it brings him liklal hergesh hamusog. It brings him to a state of hergesh hamusog, that he actually feels that which he understands. Not just that he knows about it, but he feels it. And without coming to the point of hergish, that would not naturally, that would not penetrate into the heart at all. So the Rebbe is contrasting Hasoga Elokus to Hasogas in worldly matters. And the reason for the difference is that worldly matters, world, is something which is very real to us. We don't need to contemplate on world in order that the world should be real. This is where we are. Elokus becomes real only after we contemplate very deeply into it. The word real in this context does not mean true, because we all understand and recognize the truth of Elokus. Real means actual, not even factual. We all believe that it's true. Actual means that it is here and now. Something that we can actually dedicate ourselves to. It's not a nice thought, but it's a reality. In order that Elokus in our physical existence should affect us, we have to delve into it in such great concentration and connect to it to the point that we actually experiencing this idea, this Hergish. The difference between experiencing something and knowing about it is that knowing about it, there you and this thing that you know are separate things, and it could be in two separate places. Experiencing means that you are in the same place. In order that the heart should respond to the mind, it has to come to the point where you're actually experiencing it. You know, we spoke a long time ago, pointing out that when a child looks at a picture, it's a very expressive and nice picture. What does a child do? We'll talk about a very young child. What is the first thing that he does? Takes it in his mouth. What is the first thing a kid does when you show him something interesting? Show him a watch. What does he do? Puts it in his mouth. Why? Because in his mouth, this is when he becomes real. This is when he experiences things. And so he puts it in his mouth and says, oh, it's real. You know, there is something there. By looking at it, it doesn't touch him. Even by touching it, it doesn't touch him. It is by tasting it, putting it in his mouth, that's when he feels that it's real. Because his mind, his intellect, is not yet developed. As we explained many times, this is the special property of intellect. That in intellect you can know that which is true because it's true, not because you are involved in it. Just like in sight. In sight, an intellect is compared to sight. The ear in chokhmah. Just like in sight, you know for sure that this thing exists without ever touching it. Not like in touch. You know it by touch because it affects you. Or smell, or taste. In the ear, in sight, this is the one place, the one sense that you actually experience without ever coming in contact with the object. But that depends on your intellect. Sight becomes real when your intellect is developed. So that when you see it, you see its reality. And then when your intellect is developed, then the reality that you see is more real than the reality that you taste. It's a different level completely. Sight is more convincing than anything. It's more real than anything, than any experience. Touch, smell, nothing compares to sight. We discussed this many times from various angles. So in order to bring Elokus to that level, that the understanding of Elokus should be so real that it should affect the Midas, we need to delve into it, be miskasha into it. We need to connect to it. This connecting phenomenon is true even in Gashmias. You could sometimes observe something, but you're completely disinterested in it, and you miss it. But in Gashmias, it's much easier to connect than in Ruchnias. But it's possible to look at something and not really see what you're looking at, because you're not into it. In Ruchnias, this is even much more pronounced, much more obvious, much more necessary. It demands much more concentration. Now, this which you understand is not just an understanding that you're contemplating in your mind. You know that this is true, but you're connecting to it and you experience its truth.
But in Gashmis, isn't it different? Because when a person is preoccupied with something, it's troubling him a lot. If he comes across something which he sees, he might not actively engage it, but it's definitely a part of his reality. If I'm very busy speaking on the phone, I might not pay attention to what's going around me, but it doesn't mean that whatever is in front of me that I can see, it's still very much a part of my reality. With Elokus, with Ruchnias, because we're so engaged in Gashmias, Elokus is not even part of our reality. It's removed. It's not something which is real to us.
Yes, there is truth in what you said. But I'm bringing Gashmis in support of this principle here, that even in Gashmis, even though that is, as you say, part of our reality, still it needs your attention. And if you're not into it, you may miss it even in Gashmis. In Ruchnis, this is, of course, much more demanding. And this is why the Rebbe says over here it's necessary not just his kashrus, interest, but hasmodas. Hasmoda means, hasmoda comes from the word tomid, constant. To have an extended period of time where you are concentrated on a certain inyan, a certain point, without distraction. So that this point becomes the reality that you are currently aware of, and then it becomes really real. As long as this idea is part of a spectrum of ideas, it's not going to touch you. You have to focus in at an extended period of time, so that that's the only thing you're really aware of. And then you experience it, then it becomes real. Till he reaches the point of actually sensing hamusuk, he's feeling, he's sensing that which he comprehended. Although the hergesh hamusog, that this sensing of the musog, of the comprehension, tzorich lihyois b'chol hasogo, is necessary in every hasogo, in every thought. Hamevio eize midah shetihya, any thought that should result in any kind of a midah, you have to have hergesh hamusag. We discussed this relationship, hergesh hamusag to midah. Midas are in the heart. And there is a principal difference between the heart and the mind. The mind can know things because I have proof of it. I know, I have logical proof of it. The heart does not respond to logical proof. The heart only knows what it feels. It has to have a direct connect. It doesn't know, it doesn't have this capacity for research and proving to itself. Nothing. Is it there or is it not there? And this is why, in order to affect a midah means a certain measure. Midah means a measure, which means a certain specific attitude in the heart, feeling in the heart. It has to be presented as a direct reality, something that you feel, that touches you. Anything that is proven is not going to touch the heart. It's an interesting phenomenon. Everybody, more or less has that experience. Give you an example, a little broader example, which may have broader ramifications. But there are people who are scared of flying. As a matter of fact, one time we were walking across the bridge. It's before your time. We were walking when the Rebbe was in the hospital on the east side. So Pesach, we walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the Williamsburg Bridge, to be by the side of the hospital. I'm sure you heard about this. And this, whole summer 70 walked over there. It was a huge crowd. And some people be walking on a bridge that carries trains. And some people were scared. They couldn't take walking on the bridge. They had a fear of a bridge. Bridge is so high. Look down. They get the jitters. There is no use of explaining to them, look, this is a solid bridge. It's standing here for 100 years. Trains and millions of cars pass this bridge daily. Doesn't help. Because the heart has to be affected only by a direct contact. And directly he sees that I'm on the bridge, I'm in the air. He doesn't have that capacity in his heart to be able to relate to it. Capacity in the brain, perhaps, to bring this reality to his heart. however that is. Because the heart has to be touched directly. It's not, you can't show it, you can't, it doesn't understand proof. It understands only direct reality. This is what we're saying over here. Every hasaga that results in a midah, there has to be, the hasaga has to come to a state of hergish. So even though that's true in every hasaga, b'chol zeh, nevertheless, hine behechrech, it is imperative. Imperative, and you also know what imperative means? It is a logical necessity. It's logical by force of logic. You have to recognize sheyiyeh chalukei darges behaherges shel hamusik, that there will be differences in the darges, the extent of the hergesh of this musag, of this which is being comprehended. It is not similar. Hergesh hamusag, the feel and the sense of the comprehension, hama'oirer as ha'ahava, that has to bring out ahava, lehergesh hamusag hama'oirer as hayira, to the type of feel that you have in the musog that brings out yira. Abba is a positive reaction. You're drawn to something. Yira is a negative reaction. You stand off, you stand aloof. That means, as we discussed previously in the previous mimer, Yira is from a distance, meirochik, and Ahava is mikorev, from close by, closer. In order to sense the closeness, you have to sense it's much more acutely than to sense and to stand at a distance. Oh, stay away from that. This is too big for you. That's not such a difficult thing to come by. When you say, hey, this is a great thing, let's pursue it. Then you have to have a real feel for it.
But what about when we mentioned the mashal of a chacham gadol, and they said the smarter that a person is, the more he'll know to stand in awe of him. Whereas if someone is generally a kind person, everyone is able to comprehend that. That's meaning to realize the greatness of something, you have to be a maven in the matter. You really have to understand that you should be able to stand in awe, that you should want to retreat and say, this is not just anything. This is, we mentioned the idea of the diamond, right? Someone who really knows about diamonds, then they withdraw. But someone who doesn't know anything about it, he might want to come up and he might want to touch it and play with it. So isn't that kind of contradictory to that point?
You see, we have to make it close to that which you're describing is actually a midah of tiferes, which is a completely different thing. But standing in awe, like a person is holding a diamond that's worth $5 million, part of that awe is not respect for the diamond, but what if I make a mistake? I'll never extricate myself from it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different thing.
That's the yira.
Yeah, but that's not the yira from the diamond. That's a personal protection. Abba is a drawing to the Indian. You have to have a real sense of what this thing is in order to be drawn to it. Whereas a Yira, to recognize that this is awesome, and you have to stand in respect from a distance. We'll see later on about Tiferes, which is a completely different thing. We learned that. It's a distance. It doesn't require that degree of sensing what it is. Let's get into the next part, and then we'll be able to discuss all three. Ushneihem, and both, meaning hergesh musoges ahava v'yira, the sensing of the musogi ahava v'yira, of the concept of ahava v'yira, liheyoy som kavim protim, because that they are distinct, an individual aspect, kavim. I mean, they go. Each one draws into each its extreme. This is ahava, and this is yira. Einom bedoima klal. They are totally not similar. Lehergesh hamusog, to the sense of the musog, the comprehension, hamo'oirer midas atiferes, that brings out the midah of Tiferes. What is Tiferes? Shehu ha'hizboinanus v'ha'amoko. Tiferes is this hizboinanus and the delving into li'istakolo bi'ikoro de malko, to glance at the glory of the king, of the beauty of the king. That Shomayim is sapting kveit ke, that where the Shomayim are relating the glory and the greatness of the king. The difference between Abba, Yira, and Tiferes, which we discussed in the previous minor, both Abba and Yira are a personal reaction. Meaning, I like this. I want to come close to it. I'm going to stand away. Tiferes completely excludes the person himself. You see the glory of the king, and you are glorifying in his glory. There the experience is not that this is mine, I want to come close, or this is putting me down, I'm scared of it. You're actually experiencing the glory itself. There's no secondary step. In Abba, there's a secondary step. What's the secondary step? Oh, this is very good, I want it. In Yira, oh, this is very great, I want to stand away. There's a secondary step. A personal reaction. The Istakora Bikora de Malko is as follows. The king remains where he is, and I remain where I am. Not something I'm taking for myself, or I'm staying away. But just to know the presence of the king, where he is, that itself gives me a tremendous sense of glory and greatness. To know of the presence of the king and to know how great he is. It doesn't draw me close, it doesn't push me away. Which means that there you're connecting to the king himself. In order to have that type of experience, you have to be completely pure of yourself. In other words, it's not something for a personal gain or loss, personal involvement. It is, I said, glorifying in the King himself. And this is illustrated, as we learned in previous Maimon, Hashomayim Mesaprim Kveit Keil, that the heavens relate, they actually relate to us and demonstrate Kveit Keil. Then we reflect on the universe, the multiplicity of all the various elements in the universe, the various bodies, how each one of them has its own place in the universe, has its own path, and all of them cooperate. This entire huge, innumerable units cooperate to accomplish one central function, to benefit the earth. That's mind-boggling. There you see that this entire huge universe, as great as it is, both in terms of the space of the universe and the greatness of all the various planets and all, they're all, what's called bottle, all subservient to the purposes assigned to them by the king. This is why they're all concentrated and all focused on one end for a product. There you see the greatness of the king. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that when you see the king, and the king is surrounded by hosts and armies of various levels of servants, ministers and generals and soldiers, innumerable, and they're all focused in on one function, on one purpose. So you see that throughout this entire panorama that you're observing, there's one single purpose which comes from the king. You see the greatness of the king. That the purpose and the will of the king is so great that it is able to coordinate and bring to cooperation millions of individuals. And this the Rebbe summarizes here. The Hagalgalim Heim Gufim Yuchodim. Where do we see in the Shomayim Kvoid Keil? It is in this principle that the Galgalim, the various planets and orbits, Hem Gufim Miyuchodim, are individual bodies, separate entities. Ulachol echad mehem hiluch miyuchod, and each one of them has its unique pathway. V'im zeh, and yet, hem kulam mekuvonim l'seder echad. They're all focused in and directed to one order, to one purpose. There, where this phenomenon, this coordination of all the Galgalim, They should all be focused into one direction. It's impossible to be rak mitzadkei achelyon, except when it comes from a koyach elyon, from a supreme force, power. Habli gvul, that is bli gvul, that is infinite. Shemechabram yachad, that connects them and relates them together.
Paltiel. I'm a little confused about the flow of this, particularly this last part, because it seems like at the beginning we were talking about the concept of Galus Mitzrayim Baruchnius. What does it mean in terms of the Bina not translating to the heart? And then in the middle we have this part, I guess, where it starts Amnam Kol Zeh and the Im Hiyes Harigash. I'm not exactly sure. I feel like the language here is trying to negate something that I might have thought otherwise. But it goes on to explain what we've already learned in the previous mimer. And it says, the im hiyes, never, even though like this being the case, the herigesh musa tzarik liyes b'kol hasaga hamavia ezemid shtiya b'kol zeh hina behechra. I mean, didn't we already learn in the previous mimer at length the idea that every nida necessitates its own hizbainus, and we went through the different hizbainus which they were. So why is it saying it now as if to say, don't think that it's not that way? But hechrak, you have to know this because it's already.
It took us several days. That's why you lost the track over here. Go back to the previous page and see the beginning of this paragraph.
Okay.
Well, this is just a recap of what we said before, in order to recap and introduce and for further development. We're going to go into this now, Mitzvah Shem. And the great thing that we need to understand is the very conclusion of this entire discussion, where it says in less than a few words, "Ef shel liyois rak mitzat koyach elyon habli gvul." It has to be a koyach elyon bli gvul. What is the emphasis, and what's so imperative about saying that it's a koyach bli gvul? You would say it's a huge koyach. When you say it's a koyach bli gvul, it has a different implication. And there has to be some kind of imperative, something that forces you to conclude that this is not just a big koyach. But bli gvul is not big. Bli gvul is beyond gvul. Just as an introduction to the concept. When you see cars, thousands of cars running in all kinds of directions, and they're all coordinated by the various traffic signs and traffic rules. And these traffic rules direct all the cars safely. Effectively, if you're a careful driver, you can move safely from one place to another place. You can go thousands of miles and know more or less that you arrive there safely because of the various rules that coordinate all the traffic. Now, we don't realize it when we just observe it. And it seems to us that it's the red light and the green light and the stop sign and the various markings on the ground that are instrumental in protecting and giving you safety. In truth, this is the minimal, this is the least of the whole thing. What is the real reason why there is safety on the road? Is that each car that's on the road is driven by a person who wants to be safety, who wants to live. Which is completely removed from the phenomenon of the traffic. It's a completely different thing. So what we're observing, the trick and the various traffic rules, but what you're really observing is that there's a life force that overwhelms, that is overwhelming. That no matter what the difficulty is, there's a traffic line and it's held up miles back because there's coming up an accident or whatever it is, and the traffic stands, they don't push each other. Why? Not because the cars are so smart, not because the traffic lights don't let it happen, but because there's a greater spiritual force behind it. That says that for me to stay alive is more important than getting there on time. There's a greater phenomenon there. I have to get there. I have to get there ahead of him, whatever it is. But there's something that's way beyond that. So similarly, when we observe such a huge multiplicity of units, of elements, that are so perfectly coordinated, traffic lights couldn't do it. It's not because they are coordinated to some kind of an existing force. It's because that there is a highest in there that is way above the whole phenomenon, that carries a purpose, and they're all nullified, they're all bottled to that purpose. And this is the pshat, and we learned in previous mind, that when Mistakel is the Kol B'Yikor the Malka, that here is we're actually observing the king himself, the neshama of the world. Just as when you are observing, an intricate traffic situation, and you're seeing the traffic cars, but if you're smart, you see this is not what it's displaying to you. Displaying to you something completely different. Okay. I'm sorry?
That was the idea of bleak wool, right?
The idea of bleak wool is that it is something completely removed from all the elements. Any koyach that is within the realm, with the same level of the elements, couldn't do it. This is not what we are observing. Just as the traffic light is not what keeps you safe. If you go on stay with class, why don't you take a copy of this album, huh?
Yeah, okay. Where do I get one?
Anybody have a piece of paper, a page to a copy, or else take them? Why don't you borrow this piece of paper here? It's easier to make a copy of. And walk in the office and make a copy. Huh?
Can I just listen? Can I just follow?
You could listen, it's up to you, but it would be easier. وبير هو إنيان هو further clarification of this principle, to delve in to understand what is it that we have just finished saying. Dehine yesh mokim b'seichel loimer. There is room in seichel. In other words, at first glance, it is possible for a person to come to the following explanation, logical explanation. Just as in the human body, there are limbs, organs, that are separate one from the other. The whole eiver ve'eiver, where each limb had a yesh loy koyach meyuchot. Each limb has a unique and specific koyach within it. U'pa'ula meyuchedes, not just a koyach meyuchot, but pa'ula meyuchedes. It has a specific function. The foot is not capable of riding, nor is the hand capable of walking. V'yimzeh, and yet, harekol ho'ivorim misachdim, all the limbs of the body unite lifoil piyulo meshutefes, to effect a coordinated and partnered effect. Im heyoisam evarim mecholokim, even though they are separate parts, separate limbs. This union that they're separate limbs, to elaborate on this a little bit, where it is possible for you to move your hand without moving any other part of your body. It's really separate. You can work independently, more, so to speak, from everything else. So they're separate limbs, and there's a separate directive to each limb to do what it needs to do. And yet they cooperate to effect a cooperative, a combined function, combined pe'ula. How does this occur? V'hu mitzad hanefesh hama'achta. That is because of the nefesh that unites them, umakashram, and connects them. Lifeil ha'pe'ules ha'meshutofis, to effect these coordinated and cooperative effects. If I need, for instance, a sefer, the need of the sefer is because I need to learn. So that is the need, that is a function of the head. But then the feet get up and pick and bring me to the bookcase where the sefer is lying, and the hand stretch out and pick up the sefer and bring it to the place where I have to sit, and then I'm able to learn. How is it? The head wants something, and the feet jump up and do it, and helping you do it. That's because there is a nefesh, a single nefesh, that coordinates and brings them to cooperating to affect them a single tool. So therefore, just as we observe this unifying quality in the human body, so therefore we will conclude logically, Hine kein noimar gam b'hagalgalim, that we will say the same thing regarding the galgalim, regarding all the orbits. Im heyoisom gufim chalukim, that although they are separate bodies, opo yalim piyules chalukus, and they actually affect different functions. Hine, and yet the kibbutz klolusam, when you draw them all together, heim ki ish echad, they ultimately form one unit like a single man. Just like in the human body, there is also different limbs, but each limb has its particular place and particular function, and together they form one unit. So the same thing, all the varying elements in the global space, all together they form one unit. Shezek mehorosh, that one is representative of the function of the head. V'zek meho'ayin, and another is like the eye. Ukeinyan ho'ivorim bepiyolosam beguf. So similar to the functioning of the ivorim, how they function in the body. Shekol echot poyel piyula miyuchedes, where each limb has a specific function and activity, but v'kulam yachad heimadam echot. But altogether they form one human being. Kein hu b'hagalgalim. So we conclude that the same thing is in the galgalim. Hein bedugma hazais. It's a huge body, but actually it's one huge body with a lot of different parts.
But the wording is like heart have one function, blood and this and those, and the Galgalim is everything is equal.
Equal.
Piece of earth. Maybe sun is different. Some from them is hot, some from them is not, but they look like the same.
The fact that they look the same does not mean that they're the same. They're very different. The sun and the moon are very different.
It's not like,
And the earth is very different, and the planets are all different. Okay. I'm not going to argue with you, because the fact is that this is really not the truth. In other words, it's not true to say that they are ki yishech. This is just an attempt. In other words, if one comes with seichel and says, what is the logical explanation for this unified activity? Well, we have something similar in our experience. The human body. Human body, there is a head and there's a foot, and the foot will listen to the head because of their particular position, so to speak, particular rank, and there's a perfect cooperation. So one would say that perhaps this is how it is in the Galgali. Okay. Now, if this is how it is in the Galgali, then you're left with the task of identifying which is the head, which is the foot, which is the eye, which is what are their ranks and so forth. But that's a separate thing. But conceptually, you're saying, oh, this may be the way it is. It's a theory. Then you have to start proving the theory of identifying the various ranks of the Galgali.
If you want to bring example of how they working together, so you can bring the body, all the organs working together, so it's the same. The body have a soul, and all the organs working together. But not to say like in the body, heart, it's do like this and not like this, and I see, and
we have a double question.
Yeah,
What?
a double question, yeah.
What?
They working together, and each one do his thing.
Well, the double question is not just that they don't clash. They're not in opposition to one another. But they cooperate. They give room for each other. But that they're actually focused on accomplishing one task. A unified task, which is an overall unification. It's one thing that there is some kind of a safety between them, they don't clash. But then it's a totally different thing. That which unites them to a single function, a single purpose, unified purpose. So you could say that there is safety between them, whatever the reason is. There are police officers standing all over the place and directing traffic. But why are they all coordinated to accomplish one task? So that you have to go a step further and say, oh, there must be a single body that actually directs this entire thing for a certain unified purpose, similar to the human body.
You're saying that in the body we have different organs with do different things. In the Galgalim is the same. It's not. They look the same. It's focused like each one does his thing. פעולה מיוחדת. בגלגל, like what they do, they go around.
Well, even isn't it LP Yiddishkeit, isn't it that they're depending on the different mazalais, people are born with different natures?
No, wait. We're not focusing on the issue over here. We're not focusing on the issue. The Rebbe is saying that in simple seichel, not something that will satisfy your intuition, but what would the seichel lead you to say? I explained to you before, seichel does not have to fit your intuition, your feeling? What would be the logical way of explaining it? This perfect cooperation and focused on a single element. If you have multiple elements, multiple units that are all focused on a single element, you would say, well, I have an example for it in a human body. Ya-da-da-da-da-da, hey, ya-da-da, ya-da-da-da. It says that Chassidus puts people to sleep. Why? Because you recoil so into yourself, into depth. You fall asleep.
I'll take the explanation. This is about use of Cairo when you go to see.
I'm sorry?
Use of Cairo when you try to go see the shiro with the results. Every time you go, as the results start speaking,
you fall asleep. That's what I'm saying to you.
Yeah, it's not the point. It's like bring the motion, like in the body.
Right, we're not going to make an attempt and say, okay, now this is the hand. We're trying to understand a concept. If this concept, the theory of it, the idea holds up, then we're going to have the task of identifying the various elements. We are not coming from observation of the various planets. We're coming from the observation of their unified function, their cooperation. You understand? Not from their individual elements. On the other hand, this is oversimplifying what you were saying, that they're all the same thing. Gross oversimplifying. There's multiple elements, qualities, starting with the sun and the moon, and the stars and the planets, and each planet is made of a different material and different density. You know what density is? Hardness, how dense, how heavy it is. All right. So this is, you understand, this is what's called a seichel dikei approach. And this is the pshat of seichel versus midos. Midos, if you're presenting an idea, I have to be able to feel it, touch it, taste it. Seichel doesn't need that. Seichel approaches it from a distance. Oh, maybe that's it. At least maybe that has a possibility. Does it make sense? Not did I identify the head and the foot. Does it make sense that this is how it operates? If it makes sense, then I may go to the next step and start identifying the head and the foot. As for instance, I would say that the earth is the head. This is the master. He's telling him, everyone else what to do. The earth says, oh, I need water. Where do you need water? I need water over here. Okay, let's go give him water over there. You understand what I'm saying to you? It could be you can develop a whole view of the universe from this approach. But I said this is not what we're touching upon over here. Touching upon, because the Rebbe wants us to see, that's what I said to you before, to see that there's a Keyachelin Habli Gvul. To see that there's a Keyachelin Habli Gvul, you have to be able to recognize that the Koyach that cooperates, that coordinates them, is outside of them. It's not part of them. And it's in a different realm. It's Bli Gvul relative to them. In order to recognize that, you have to go in there and try to delve into the concept itself. Because our first approach would be, well, it is all contained within itself. The whole cooperation is contained within the body of existence. It's not Bli Gvul, it's not some force outside of it. How is it? It's similar to your own body. Where is it? That's a separate thing. Okay? This is it for today. Give you a chance to reflect on it. A couple of days.
Outside.
What kind of leaves are in it? It's just a weed? Can you show me which one it is?
It's all over the place.
Why don't you